We roll on here on the Mountain West Men's Basketball Media Day show, powered by Air Force Reserve. We are live on the Mountain West Network here in Colorado Springs. And we are pleased now to be headed to Fresno, California, and the campus of Fresno State University, and bring in the head coach of the Bulldogs, Justin Hutson. Coach, appreciate you making time for us. How's life in Fresno?
It's great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be able to speak to you today, and we're excited for the season to get started.
Well, we're super excited to speak to you as well. Let's talk about your third season now at Fresno State. Last season, 11-19. In 2019, one starter returns. And when I look at your roster, Coach, you have 10 new players on a 14-man roster. How difficult has it been to get some cohesion with all of these new guys, all kind of learning at the same speed?
It is difficult, especially with us not being here for the summer and the fall and, being in quarantine. But it is also exciting. I like our new guys. I like our returners. So, you got to control what you can. So it's going to be slow for us, but we're going to still demand to try to get better every day and get out there and compete on the floor.
As we have done all morning and afternoon here on this show, if you have a question for Coach, make sure you raise your virtual hand. At which point we'll call on you. You can ask your question. If you have a follow-up, go ahead and leave your hand up. If you don't have a follow-up, you can bring your hand down. Our first question, Coach, comes from the Albuquerque Journal and Jeff Grammer.
Hey, Jeff.
Justin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good.
I want to jump right into Orlando. Some questions about him. First off, I look at the roster. I see he's listed now as a 7-footer. So he's grown a little bit since last year, it sounds like. I'm curious what the challenge to him from you as a coach is on what he needs to do to take that next step from what a year ago was one of the, top 2 freshmen certainly in the league, to maybe that next step to be one of the top players overall in the league, and what you kind of challenged him to do this year, what you need from him.
Get better at a little everything, which starts with just being consistent with his leadership on the floor, by his actions, with what he's saying. Just being more consistent. He's done a good job, and I think he had some really good games last year, some times where he didn't, like most freshmen have. And we're both on the same page of trying to become more consistent at what we're doing. It's not just one thing. I think you looked at, we wanted to make him stronger, which he was able to do on his own, but missing a lot of time because of the pandemic. He wasn't able to be with our strength coach all spring and summer, but he's also worked very hard on his own to become more stronger. I think everybody knows that as that happens, his game is going to take off also.
I want to follow up too with you touched on the difficulties of the no summer and the off season just being what it is for everybody. But you guys have had a pause, I know, in the team activities here in New Mexico. The governor has a health order that they aren't even allowed to practice right now in groups larger than 5. So yeah, I know it's hitting everybody in different ways, and this season ahead is going to be that way too. I know no coach and no team is going to take this as a punt the season and it doesn't really matter what happens this year. But with all those challenges and not being with your team with so many new faces this offseason, how do you approach the expectation part of it all? You don't want to say you're not going to compete every night, but there are some changes this year that kind of affect maybe what teams should be expected to do. And I'm curious if you've changed anything in how you approach the expectation level as a coach.
I have not. I think once you start changing your expectations, then it's getting dangerous. You start getting into making excuses mode. And I think the reality of it is we've had more COVID tests since March than we've been together in the gym. So I think this is maybe our 15th time being in the gym since March. So I know I've had that little stick put up my nose way more times in 15 than being around my team since March. I'm not talking about during the season. We've had 2 quarantines, 28 days of quarantines, and we were gone. And then you add in 10 new guys. So you're saying, well, where are your expectations to get better every day and to go out and compete and see where we're going to be? I love the group that we have. I love the effort that they're bringing to the equation. So I think we all have to be mature, on how we're handling this situation.
Our next question comes from Davis Potter with the Casper Star Tribune.
Hey, Justin, Wyoming hired a new coach in Jeff Linder, who had also been, I know, an assistant on Leon's staff at Boise State a few years ago. But just curious if you're familiar with him at all, and what you think about that hire, what you might see from Wyoming this year.
I thought Wyoming had a great coach, and I think they hired a great coach. I think both of those guys, I thought, Allen did a great job, starting with how he finished in the Mountain West Conference, and I think hiring Jeff Linder is a great hire for the Wyoming Cowboys. I know, I've known Leon very well being in this conference, at least basketball-wise. I know Jeff had a big impact what was going on over there at Boise. So I'm sure he's going to get the Cowboys, going in the right direction.
Thank you, Davis. Next question comes from the San Diego Union Tribune and Mark Ziegler.
Hey, Z. How you doing, Z?
I'm doing good. This league traditionally has been kind of a guard-driven league. You lost a lot in the backcourt, but you actually have a lot of guys coming in. I wonder if you just take us through what that backcourt looks like or what it should look like this season for you.
Yeah, we did lose a lot of guards, and I think when you start looking at preseason rankings and different things that way, I think you're going to go on what level of production do you have coming back? And we don't have a whole lot of production coming back. We definitely don't have any production coming back in the backcourt, i.e. ranked preseason number 8. But we have Isaiah Hill, who came in from Tulsa, who's eligible right away, so he will help. Jordan Campbell will be back, who didn't play much at all his first year here. We have Deion Stroud, who transferred in from UTEP, who is a Fresno native, very talented, and we're hoping that he will be eligible. We have Kyle Harding that's coming in from Santa Maria, who's actually practiced 2 days since he's been here. But we're excited in the 2 days that he's practiced. And he brings a certain level of maturity, even though he's also a sophomore. So we do have some backcourt guys that are pretty good players that we're excited to put out there on the floor. We did sign Devin Gage, who is a 5th-year transfer from DePaul, that we're hoping that will bring some stability and some experience to the backcourt, even though he is new to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next question comes from John Tiedel of Hoops HD.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, John. Yes, I can hear you, John. How are you?
Good, thank you. Just wanted to know, going back to Orlando, he obviously, when you start 29 games as a freshman, you have a lot of good pieces to your game. It didn't seem like three-point shooting was one of his fortes. As a coach, is it something where going into his sophomore year, you want to work with him to make him a better three-point shooter, or say, look, Orlando, we already have enough three-point shooters. We want you to do other things?
I think that's a great question. I think you want to make sure that he's taking good three-point shots. There's no question on that. He has to continue to work on it because he's capable of making shots behind the line. But you want to have him taking good three-point shots. Unfortunately, we weren't able to work with him in the offseason. That's when you get guys better. You don't come into the fall and you got 15 days of practice and say, I'm going to start working on your three. Usually you work on, your individual game in the offseason and you get with your coaches and you develop some reps. So we're going to have to monitor how well he's shooting it, all the while helping him develop, but understanding he's going to have to take good shots.
Thank you, John. Again, we have about 10 minutes left with Coach Hutson from Fresno State. If you have a question for Coach, make sure you raise your hand. We'll get you in queue. Our next question comes from the Idaho Press Tribune and BJ Rains.
Hey, Coach. I cover Boise State, and obviously Derrick Alston was named the preseason player of the year today. I'm just wondering, as an opposing coach that's obviously gone up against Derrick, what makes him so hard to guard, and why do you think he's obviously the preseason player of the year in the league?
His versatility and his experience. He's been well coached for, 4 years now? Mm-hmm. And he's a young man that he waited his turn and he worked. And those guys usually benefit the most. In today's age where a lot of people leave early or transfer when they don't get a chance, he stayed with that program. He continued to develop, and we know how well those coaches develop over there. And now you got a guy coming back with that level of production and that level of experience. It is definitely a recipe for success.
To be, 6'9", and Leon's saying he's really improved his three-point shooting this year, which might be kind of scary. But the versatility he has and the different things he can do, how hard is he for a matchup defensively? Yeah,
he definitely. If he's shooting a three better, it's definitely going to make it easier for him and his team. you know, his versatility at that size and his, you know, he plays at a nice pace. I think those things are always hard to guard. He's definitely hard to guard.
Thank you, Coach.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Jackson Moore, 24/7 Sports.
Hi, Jackson.
Hi, Coach. Thanks for the time. Curious, besides Orlando, now you've got 2 other 7-footers. Of course, Hassan coming back, but you know, does that change those guys? Maybe what you might do schematically, offense and defense? Are you comfortable with where those guys are at right now as far as implementing them into your game plan?
It's a good question. That I think the lack of time being on the floor, those things, you know, it's hard to answer those questions right at the time. You know, we're happy with how hard they're working. Hassan has gotten better, and Braxton is a heck of a talent. I mean, he's an unbelievable talent, but you know, you can't really decide if they're good enough yet that they're going to play alongside Orlando, or are they going to play behind Orlando. Usually those things take time, you know, or seeing who earns it out on the floor, you know, how well they play together. So, you know, I think we have a few more days to try to make sure that we're organized enough that whether they can play behind him or alongside of him.
Thank you, Jackson. If you have follow-up questions now for Coach Hutson, you can enter the queue. Our first follow-up does come from Mark Ziegler of the San Diego Union Tribune.
Are you back? Are you back on the floor now?
Yeah, we just got back. Mm-hmm.
Today or yesterday or?
We got back, I believe, Sunday.
And how many days were you off the floor for this quarantine?
I believe 14. This was our second quarantine, so it's been 28 days.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, from Colorado Springs, the Colorado Springs Gazette, Brent Brigham.
Yeah.
Hi, Brent.
Hello. So you're one of the few coaches in the league who was around when Joe Scott's original players were at Air Force. You know, they were still around in 06 when you were an assistant. Have you seen many differences in that program in that time? Or do you think, you know, was that team, when those first Air Force teams you saw, a lot different than the teams you saw over the past few years?
Yeah, I believe I only saw Joe's teams maybe 1 year or 2 years. You know,
yeah,
if I'm
he
correct.
left in 04, but there a lot of those same players were around.
If I'm correct.
Yeah.
You know, well, you know, that I think that's the question you're asking, and what's the difference of Joe as the other coaches? I think they all run the vaunted Air Force offense, but I think the level of what the emphasis is, I think the emphasis out of the offense is the stuff that's different. You know, through the time of being in the Mountain West Conference for as many years that I've been in, I think each offense, you know, some of the shell is the same, but the emphasis on what you're trying to get, I think, becomes different between each coach.
And then playing the 2-game series, when you do see teams that are a lot different, like in Air Force, do you think that gives you an advantage that second day, having your players having seen it in person?
I don't know. I've never done that before. So we're all going to learn on the fly. So I'm not sure about that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Next question for you, Coach, comes from your own backyard. Stephen Hicks from ABC 30 in Fresno.
Hey, Stephen.
Coach, hey.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Kind of picking up on everything that everyone has already asked in terms of the 10 new players and getting back on the floor. Just how would you compare this season and where your team is at 2 weeks before the first game for you versus years past? And how do you hope to build chemistry as the season progresses?
How I view this team in years past. Well, my first year here, you know, you kind of knew what you had. It didn't take long to figure out what you had. We did have a few new guys. You know, we had Deshaun Taylor who came back, who was proven. You had Sam Bittner who played, you know, so he didn't have a lot of production, you know, but he had played. But it wasn't hard for us to figure out, you know, after I got hired in the spring. By the time we started summer, you kind of knew where your strengths and weaknesses lied and what you were going to do, you know. So then the second year with so many new guys, you know, you're trying to figure out what you have. And we're very similar this year. And you would like to the quicker you can figure out, you know, who the better players are, what the strengths, what the weaknesses are, You're always going to have a base in what you're trying to do as a coach. But the sooner you figure that part out, then you can get moving in that direction. Well, with so many days off, it's not easy to figure that out with so many new guys.
And then just following up on that, the chemistry, is that something that builds throughout the season just with the time that they'll spend together?
That always builds throughout the season. And when you starting chemistry, it's one thing they haven't had a chance to hang out off the floor, because, you're not supposed to hang out in groups. But then chemistry on the floor is the most important. So, I've had teams that were great off the floor that aren't great on the floor. So I think them being able to sacrifice for a greater goal, and I think that's what you're looking for is chemistry. That's going to do nothing but take time. We're still figuring out who's going to play, let alone who's going to gel together. So I think when you start talking about preseason rankings, you got a lot of production come back to and chemistry developed. So yes, we love our talent. We're working hard, but chemistry is going to take a while.
Thank you, Stephen. I will stay in Fresno for our next question. Julia Lopez of KSEE TV.
Hi, Julia.
Hey, Coach. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Going back to Orlando Robinson, obviously he's a sophomore, young guy, but what are the expectations of him as a leader and really taking control of this team?
Leading by example. He's not going to do anything on his own. We all are trying to get better every day and grow. So I think leading by example, being in the right spots, doing the right thing, keep it playing it, moving into the next play, playing with a great attitude and great effort. I think those things are the stuff that we're a staple in our program that we're talking about every day. So as Orlando continues to do that better and better, he'll be more successful, and so will we.
And obviously a unique season for everybody, but the Mountain West games are going to be, 2 games in 3 days. What are the challenges that you see, and what are some of the positives that you might see from, doing that?
Well, it's all about health, so I think the positives are going to be you're going to take less plane flights. I think that's why we did it, is you're going to take less plane flights and try to stay healthy. And everybody's doing whatever they can to get as many games in as possible. We're still trying to get practices in. So it's hard for me to think about anything else besides I know everybody's making moves to try to get as many games as possible. But we haven't had many days at all to have any practice time.
Thank you, Julia. We'll stay in Fresno. Next question, Mark Jones.
What's up, Q?
Hey, what's happening, Jay? How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing pretty good. And yourself?
Man, I got a conditioning issue, and I'm just thinking when you talk about practice, the biggest thing that happens is you don't have enough time to get up and down the floor to get your guys in condition. Will that force you to play more players early on in the season?
Condition and then getting somebody hurt. It's a tough quandary. The first week we were back, I think we started a week later than everybody else on that. And then the first week that we were back, obviously you haven't seen these guys either ever or in 7 to 8 months. How hard are you going to push them that first week? So now you're going to get in shape and shoot. Then all of a sudden we go about a week and a half and we're 14 days out again. So when you come back, how hard are you going to push them? Hey, we got to get in shape. And then you get somebody hurt, so you're trying to balance those things. And obviously safety is always comes, first for us. So we're trying to stay safe. So that's a tough thing that you just got to try to manage.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Q.
Thank you, Mark. Coach, last year you played 6 freshmen to the tune of 101 minutes per game combined. That led the Mountain West. What sort of growth have you seen from that time? Obviously, you've had limited time on the practice floor, but those guys who probably saw minutes before their time, what sort of growth do you expect from that? We only have a couple of those freshmen back. So those 2 freshmen, the couple of freshmen that we have back, you would expect growth. There's no question. So I think the growth we're going to see is when they get on the floor, because like I said, if we haven't practiced much, then I can't tell you how much growth we've had. Fair enough. I appreciate your insight. Appreciate your time here today, Coach. Hopefully you get back on the court as soon as possible and you're able to see that growth, we look forward to seeing you out on the floor here real soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. That's Coach Justin Hutson of the Fresno State Bulldogs. Up next, we're going to hear from Orlando Robinson, who Coach Hutson talked about at length during his time here today. This is a Fresno State team that is picked 8th in the preseason. One starter returning, that being Orlando Robinson, a guy who had to put in a lot of time on his own, obviously, to get into shape, to get into basketball shape. We'll see how all that translates out on the basketball floor. It's going to be a very, very inexperienced young Fresno State team. It's a team that does have some length, though, as Coach Hutson talked about. 3 7-footers on the roster. So how that might change the way they play, I guess time will tell. But this is a team that led the Mountain West in blocked shots with 3.8 per game a year ago. Orlando Robinson had a big role in that, 29 blocks himself in the 2019-2020 season. A three-point game has long been a staple of Fresno State. They ranked 2nd in the league with three-point field goals made per game a year ago, 9.74. Let's head back to the campus of Fresno State and bring in the sophomore forward from Las Vegas, Nevada, Orlando Robinson. Orlando, Coach talked about how you had to put in a ton of time on your own to make sure that at least at this point you were ready to rock and roll on the basketball floor. What did you do to get yourself somewhat in shape, knowing that in shape may be different than basketball shape?
Some of the things I did were waking up early in the morning, running the track as many times as I can just so I could stay, have my wind about me, doing push-ups, sit-ups, core workouts, stuff like that. And wherever there was a gym and I could get in there safely, I was in there for as long as I could be. So countless hours of doing that repeatedly were enough for me to stay in shape and do what I need to do.
If you have a question for Orlando, make sure you raise your virtual hand. We will get you in queue. You'll be allowed a question and a follow-up if you so choose. Orlando, you started all 30 games as a freshman, 5 20-point games during that campaign, one shy of a program record set by Paul George. To push yourself in that sort of stratosphere, along with one of the all-time greats at Fresno State and a guy who's gone on to, very, very good things at the professional level, does that blow your mind that you were in that stratosphere?
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to be in that scenario with Paul George. I wish I could have beat him, but yeah, it's great. Feels great.
Our first question for you, Orlando, comes from John Teetle from Hoops HD.
Hi, Orlando. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Thanks. I believe you were listed at 6'10" last year and are now 7 foot. Have you talked to your doctor to know if you're done growing or if you might have a couple inches left in you, perhaps?
Well, I think all males stop growing at the age of 22, so I would imagine that I would continue to keep growing until that age. So I may have two or 3 more inches on me. Who knows? I hope so.
Orlando, because you guys have been limited in the time that you've been able to get on the floor, I'm curious, how much conversation have you had with fellow teammates to make sure that everyone is accountable, telling them what you're doing, what are you doing? How is that going within the team to make sure that you guys are getting ready in some way, shape, or form?
Just like a lot of communication. It's important for me as a leader on the team to conversate with my team and talk to them about being responsible on and off the court. And it's important for us to have a season in that aspect, because if those talks aren't had, then the season isn't looking good. So I need to make sure I have that conversation with my teammates.
Again, if you have a question for Orlando, raise your hand. We'll get you in queue. Because you have so many new guys, what sort of inroads and progress have you been able to make in the limited time you've had on the floor? Have you seen some of the progress?
Yeah, I mean, I could see as the weeks go by and the practices continue day by day, all of us are getting closer. Our chemistry is getting right. But it's important for us to keep that going, because without it, it's going to be hard due to all the circumstances of COVID and everything that we had to deal with. It's important that we take this time to really mold ourselves with each other and really come together as a team so we can be successful in the rest of the season.
We do have a question for you. Go to Coach Q, Mark Jones in Fresno.
Hey, Big Seven. You're looking good out there, big man. I want to know, we know that you're growing physically, but as a leader, what were some of the things that you took upon yourself this offseason to develop your leadership skills so that you can lead this team?
In the off season, I just wanted to be the best player I could be, just train my mind and body as much as I can. And in the season right now, I really took it upon myself to help the new guys out because we have so many. All 10 of them are coming from different places and different atmospheres. So I tried my best to show them the ropes, try to do anything in my power to help them in any way I can. And lead by example. So it goes hand in hand, helping them by my voice and leading by example, making sure I'm doing everything the right way, the proper way, so that they can follow in what I do.
With a follow-up to this is that with the COVID out there, it's hard to see guys if you're away from one another. Are you FaceTiming guys? Are you guys having group Zoom meetings as a team?
No, we haven't had many of those. No.
Okay. Thank you.
We should, though.
Thank you, Coach Q. Next question from Jackson Moore, 24/7 Sports.
Orlando, last year we saw you play alongside Nate. We saw you in a center with the 4-out offense at times. Just what's your sense of where your front court teammates are at and how that might change or keep your role similar to what we saw last year?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just last year we saw you play alongside Nate at times. Other times you were kind of the solo big out there. Just what's your impression of your front court teammates and how that's going to impact your role this season?
Well, last season I was a big focal point in the offense and defense, and now this year that's going to be it's going to be more extreme. Now that I did my part last year, and now I'm the man. Now I gotta all the eyes are going to be on me. So my teammates are going to have to learn how to play around me, and I'm going to have to learn how to play with them in that aspect. I got a lot of good guys like Braxton, Jordan, Dion, Isaiah. They're all good. They're all very skilled, and they are very smart as well. And I think we're going to be really good. And there's some aspects that I need to work on my game, but in rebounding and defense, and I'm focusing in on those. And my teammates are right behind me with that. So,
thank you, Jackson, for the questions, and thank you, Orlando, for your time here today. Stay happy, stay healthy, and good luck getting out on the practice floor. And we look forward to seeing you and the Bulldogs out on the game floor here real soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.